Would you like to know what Netflix and BBC have to say about closed captions and what are the rules to follow in the audiovisual industry to create the best subtitle video? Well, I searched all the main streaming platforms, went through their website and read all the guidelines so you don't have to. Hello, welcome back to the channel. As I said in the intro, today we're gonna compare the subtitle guidelines of the main streaming platforms, and to do so we're gonna analyze three different categories: the duration of the subtitle, the number of characters and lines, and all the extra rules, which will then split into multiple subcategories. Let's start with the most famous streaming platform, Netflix. So I'm looking at their website right now, and as for the first category, which is the duration, it says that the minimum duration should be 5/6 of a second per subtitle, while the maximum duration should be 7 seconds per subtitle. As for the characters and lines, it says 2 lines maximum and 42 characters per line. Text should usually be kept to 1 line unless it exceeds the character limitation. When the text has to be broken into 2 lines, follow these principles. I'm gonna add some examples on the screen so you can see what I'm talking about. The line should be broken after punctuation marks, before conjunctions or prepositions. The line break should not separate a noun from an article, a noun from an adjective, a first name from a last name, a verb from a subject pronoun, a prepositional verb from its preposition, a verb from an auxiliary, reflexive pronoun, or negation. This is what I've always said in my videos as well. So the goal of a caption is to avoid interrupting the flow of the viewer. So in case you need to add a second line, make sure the first one makes sense and you don't split it in a weird way. All subtitles should be center justified and placed at either the top or the bottom of the screen, except for Japanese, where vertical positioning is allowed. Please ensure subtitles are positioned accordingly to avoid overlap with on-screen text. In case where overlap is impossible to avoid, the subtitles should be placed where easier to read. So of course, as you probably noticed, if you watch subtitle content, the closed captions are always positioned in the bottom part of the screen and they are centered, unless there is some other element on the screen such as credits. In that case, you are allowed to move the captions in another place on the screen. Usually it's going to be at the top or in a corner, but just make sure you don't cover important parts of the scene such as faces. As for Netflix, each language has more specific guidelines, so in case you're interested in knowing what your language looks like for Netflix, make sure to check their website. But for the sake of this video, we're gonna keep on with English and see all the guidelines. Let's have a look at the extra rules. So use an ellipsis to indicate a pause, 2 seconds or more, or if dialogue trails off. Use an ellipsis followed by a space where there is a significant pause or hesitation within a subtitle. As for currency, it should not be converted in the subtitle files. And as for brand names, you have 3 different options. So one is to use the same English language brand name if it's widely known and used in that territory. Number 2 is to use the name by which the brand is known in that territory. Or number 3, use a generic term for the product. So for example, if I were to say Nutella, we could leave the name like this in multiple languages because it's a brand that is known worldwide. While if I'm talking about like some specific candy brand which is only known in Italy, then you don't have to keep it like that in the other languages, but you can either change it and use another famous brand or generalize it. Now let's move on to numbers. So from 0 to 10, numbers should be written out. Above 10, numbers should be written numerically, and when a number begins a sentence, it should always be spelled out. Dates should always be written in the order in which they are said, but omitting words like the and of. Decades should be written using numerals, and as for century, for example, the 21st century should be written out like this. Use a hyphen without a space to indicate 2 speakers in one subtitle, with a maximum of 1 speaker per line. When identifiers are needed, they should follow the hyphen as follows. Basically, you need to add the speaker inside 2 square brackets. Now let's move on to foreign dialogues. So if the foreign dialogue is translated, use for example in Spanish inside square brackets. If foreign dialogue is not meant to be understood, use, for example, a general "speaking Spanish" inside square brackets. Make sure to specify the accent or dialects when relevant. For example, you can write "in Spanish accent." Foreign words that are used in an English dialogue should be italicized. So since we've been using Spanish as an example, here's the way you should write sentences. Italic is used for so many things and I'm gonna list them here. So it's for narration, unspoken thoughts or inner monologue, song lyrics when sung, a dialogue that is heard through electronic media such as a phone, television, computer, loudspeaker, robotic voices and so on, which is basically what we call the distorted voices, and also for titles of books, periodicals, works of art, albums, movies, TV shows, radio shows, video games, and so on. If you watch movies or TV shows, they will often use songs, so here's the way Netflix decides to caption them. Subtitle all audible song lyrics that do not interfere with dialogue. Song titles should be in quotation marks. Song lyrics should be enclosed within a music note at the beginning and end of each subtitle. Make sure to add a space between the music note and the text. Only question marks and exclamation marks should be used at the end of a line. No commas or periods are to be used at the end of a line. Commas can be used within the lyric line if necessary. So there's one more extra rule and we're gonna see that now. So the plot pertinent dialogue always takes precedence over background dialogue. Mispronunciation should not be reproduced in the translation unless plot pertinent or part of the characterization. So this means that if it's a character that mispronounces names but it's part of his personality trait, then we should not change it in the translation because it's relevant to the plot. Their website also includes a long list of acronyms and abbreviations, so I'm gonna leave the link in the description and you can have a look at it. And that was all for Netflix, so now we're ready to move to another platform. Actually, before we move on, I have something to tell you. I noticed that only 4% of the people who are watching my videos are actually subscribed to my channel, which means that 96% of you aren't. So please just take 1 second of your time to subscribe to the channel so you won't miss the upcoming videos, but also because it would mean the world to me to have your support and encouragement for the next videos. Now let's move on to another pillar in the audiovisual industry, which is BBC. They also have a very specific guideline on their website, but let's analyze our 3 categories. So as for the duration, which is our first category, the recommended subtitle speed is 160 to 180 words per minute. Based on this, a caption should be left on screen for a minimum period of around 0.3 seconds per word. So as you can see here, they have a different parameter, so they don't give us a minimum and maximum length for subtitles. They then specify, try to allow extra reading time for your subtitles in the following circumstances. One is unfamiliar words, so if it's a word or phrase that is extremely hard to read without more time. 2, when there are several speakers in one subtitle. 3, when there is a lot happening in the picture. Allow viewers enough time both to read the subtitle and to take in the visuals. And 4 is in case of shot changes. The normally accepted position for subtitles is towards the bottom of the screen. It is most important to avoid obscuring on-screen captions, any part of the speaker's mouth or any other important activity, which is pretty much what we said before with Netflix. Now let's see our second category, which is characters and lines. In teletext, which is used to display subtitles on some broadcast platforms, line length is limited to 37 characters. A maximum subtitle length of 2 lines is recommended. 3 lines may be used if you are confident that no important picture information will be obscured. Subtitles and lines should be broken at logical points. The ideal line break will be at a piece of punctuation like a full stop, comma, or dash. If the break has to be elsewhere in the sentence, avoid splitting the following parts of the speech. And again, I will add some examples over here. So the article and the noun, the preposition and the following phrase, the conjunction and the following phrase, a pronoun and a verb, and parts of a complex verb. So here, as you can see, every platform has the same rules, which is what I also do when subtitling, and BBC explains the reason why we do that with a very nice and short sentence, which is good line breaks make the process of reading and understanding far easier. Now let's see a few extra rules. So to identify the speakers, either use a color or a dash. If they are off-screen voices, which means we can see who's talking, you can either use an arrow, and they say to basically insert a greater than or less than symbol, but this is something I honestly never do. Or you can add labels, which means that you will just specify the name of the speaker. There's also an interesting category in the website, which is intonation and emotion. It says, for example, to indicate a sarcastic statement, use an exclamation mark in brackets. Use caps to indicate when a word is stressed. However, avoid large chunks of text in caps, as they can be hard to read. To indicate whispered speech, a label is most effective. As for numbers, again, it's pretty similar to Netflix. So the numbers 1 to 10 are often better spelled out, and also spell out any number that begins a sentence. Speaking about money, they actually focus on pounds because of course they are English. So they say to use the numerals plus the pound sign for all monetary amounts except when it's less than £1, for which you need to use the word pence. For other currencies, you need to check their list of supported symbols, but I would suggest to just spell out. Now, speaking about songs, all music that is part of the action or significant to the plot must be indicated in some way. If it is somebody playing an instrument, or if it's a record playing music on a radio, then write the label in uppercase. If the music is incidental music, meaning that it's not part of the action and it's well known, the label begins with music, and it's followed by the name of the music. If the music is not part of the action, but it is crucial for the viewer's understanding of the plot, a sound effect label should be used, like eerie music or suspenseful music. They also specify that it's generally simpler to keep punctuation in songs to a minimum. To caption the lyrics of a song, either use a hash mark or musical note at the beginning and end of the subtitle. So once again, just like Netflix. Platform number 3 is TED, which stands for Technology, Entertainment, Design. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, TED is a non-profit organization which organizes events all around the world by following their motto, which is ideas worth spreading. So basically they make all these events where people are invited to give speeches which focus always on very important topics. And all the videos will be then uploaded to their website, to the platform or YouTube channel, and volunteers will make the subtitles for free in as many languages as possible, again to embrace their motto, so to spread all the ideas and the good speeches all around the world. Here is what their website has to say about closed captions, and again we will see our 3 categories. So as for the duration, the subtitle must be on screen for at least 1 second, so they don't give specific rules about the maximum amount of seconds. As for the number of characters and lines, when a subtitle is longer than 42 characters, break it into 2 lines. Never use more than 2 lines per subtitle. Keep linguistic holes together when breaking lines. Keep the subtitle reading speed at a maximum of 21 characters per second. So they will also tell you how to break the 2 lines, but it's identical to the other websites we just saw. So basically you always need to make sure that the reading process is easier. Bear in mind that, as I said, all translators here are volunteers, so nobody is paid to make subtitles, and I also collaborate with them, so I'm not paid either, but I would recommend you to try it, not only to help spread the ideas, but also to practice and to be more fluent and quick on subtitling. If you have a look at their websites, they will also explain the 3 different categories of people who work at the translation. The first category is the linguists, so the translators and transcribers, who will basically create and edit the subtitles. Then we have the reviewers, who can edit, review and approve the subtitles. And then we have the language supervisors, who can edit, review, approve or unapprove the subtitles which are going to be posted. Next is RAI, which is a very famous Italian broadcasting company that is focusing a lot on accessibility and has been creating content for the deaf and hard of hearing. So again, we will see our 3 different categories on their website. So as for the duration, they have different rules. Their website says at least 2 seconds, but if it's 1 full line, they would suggest 3 seconds, and for 2 lines, 5 seconds. However, the reading speed needs to be adjusted to the audience and their difficulties, because again, when deaf people are watching content, they don't have the sound as a form of support, but they only have the visual parts or the text. So of course, it's gonna take just a bit longer for them to read the text. As for the characters and lines, 37 characters per line and maximum 2 lines. Now we're gonna see the extra rules. So to identify the speaker, it is mandatory to use a color for each speaker. The main characters will have to be distinguished using the following colors: white, light blue, green and purple, right in this order, with a black background, and then yellow on a black background for the other speakers. So we have a bit of a difference here on the speakers, but as for other rules, they will share the same guidelines as Netflix and BBC. So for example, numbers from 0 to 10 should be written out. We can use hash keys for the singing parts. We need to split the sentence without separating, for example, the article and the noun, the adjective and the noun, the subject and the verb, and so on. And we do translate foreign dialogues, but specifying what language it is. I also had a look at Spanish and French websites to see if there's any big differences, but it's actually pretty similar to the websites we just saw. So it goes from 37 to 40 characters per line and a maximum of 2 lines. But in each case, what they really focus on is the synchronization part and the importance of making the content as easy and as accessible to everyone. So to sum it up, I will combine everything we just saw and make a quick recap. And that was all for this video. I hope you learned something new about the audiovisual industry in general and the way these platforms deal with closed captions. Once again, if you're just starting out and you want to gain some experience, I would totally recommend to subscribe to the TED platforms or to other platforms, and you might end up being the one working for the colossal companies, who knows. Please leave a like or a comment, share the video with whoever might be interested in learning more about this word, and also make sure to subscribe to my channel. Bye!